thank you for being a keynote speaker for the GovDefenders Cybersecurity Virtual event. Would you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, thanks, Shamoon. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate. My name's Jim Wiggins. I'm the Executive Director of the Federal IT Security Institute. FITSE, as it's known, is a nonprofit organization that is focused on certifying and training different aspects of the federal workforce. I've been involved with the organization for about 3 years, and my background stretches back a full 16 years in the certification and education workspace area.
Well, we appreciate the time that you've taken to speak with us. Quick question for you. The 2012 FISMA report was released recently, and according to the report, cybersecurity budgets increased $1.3 billion, and yet the budget as a percentage went down for cybersecurity training. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think that cybersecurity is one of those hot button issues that the government realizes needs to be accounted for in terms of addressing. Training historically in all facets and all walks is one of the first things that typically gets cut. So when the federal government, for example, is looking at how do we curtail or how do we slow down spending, things like sequestration, fiscal cliff, things like that, it comes as no surprise to me that the training happens to be one of those aspects. Even cybersecurity training would be a casualty of that.
Great. You've had a lot of experience within the training realm of cybersecurity. How has cybersecurity training evolved over the years?
So that's a really good question, Shamoon. It's fascinating. So I've been involved in IT-related education for 16 years, and for 12 years I've been focused on the cybersecurity realm. What's fascinating to me is that the best way to describe it is that the skill development that we've seen historically over the last decade has been really more focused on what I'll call white-collar type of skill. People that want to be professional, that want to be managerial, that want to have oversight, budgets, teams, things along that nature. In my estimation, the problem is the industry, and through some of the newer threats that have developed, really are requiring more blue-collar workers, people that are able to roll up their sleeves, get into the trenches, maintain a certain level of technical competency, be able to monitor what's going on the networks, being able to identify, quarantine, or remediate some of these advanced cyber threats that we're going to talk about in today's presentation. So I think there's been this natural evolution in some ways of the threat landscape, but unfortunately the focus historically over the last decade has been a continuum of professional development, again, white collar, as opposed to hard technical skills, which I refer to as blue collar.
That's interesting. You mentioned the blue collar versus the white collar. There were several educational breakouts during this year's RSA conference that reiterated what you had just stated, that we need more practitioners rather than the theoreticians.
If I can comment on that, I think one of the things that works against us is that there's a natural progression within a lot of organizations that you may start off, for example, in IT, but eventually you want to navigate towards senior leadership. You want to become, a manager, and that natural progression has a tendency of moving you away from maintaining and continuing to refine those technical competencies and those technical skills. So it's unfortunate, but it almost just seems as if there's the career ladders for a lot of organizations when they get into business development and opportunities to become partners and try to really kind of work up the corporate ladder, kind of work against this whole concept of needing to continue to develop those hard technical skills.
Absolutely understood. There's been a movement also towards a two-track system for those that actually progress from technical positions, keep them on the technical track, allow them to progress their careers versus going into management and more of the mission side. Now, getting back to some of the questions I had, one other question I had for you is, if an agency is considering cybersecurity training along the career progression line, what should they consider?
So I think that we kind of alluded to this already, was that the skill development needs to be in the area of hard technical skills. It's, I think, really kind of underserved in our market right now. There tends to be, still today, an emphasis on, going out there and receiving a certificate or certification based on a 5-day course that demonstrates a certain level of competency. And a lot of those tend to be less technically focused, more on governance and management. And I submit that the workforce really needs more blue collar, more down in the trenches kind of people. And so I promote this idea of agencies looking at how do we take existing IT professionals and conceivably move them into the cybersecurity realm. It seems to me that that's the kind of mix that we need to have, because in order to build the full litany, if you will, of skills that are really necessary, it takes time. So for a lot of organizations that have technical workforces out there, system administrators, network engineers, system analysts, people that today work in the trenches, maybe more on an operations side, those are good candidates because they can transition those skills into the cyber realm and be quite a bit ahead of the curve as opposed to people starting from scratch.
Understood. Having said that, this was also reiterated in the RSA conference. What is the unemployment rate for cybersecurity professionals?
So in my estimation, all the reports I've read suggest that there are not enough people out there for the position. So we have really the equivalent of a 0% unemployment rate today, which for anybody wanting to get into cybersecurity, it's a great field that will continue to be very profitable and provide a lot of rewards.
Jim, sometimes recruitment efforts are such that we have to go outside the organization. We can't simply, most organizations cannot just simply repurpose internal personnel. When recruiters go outside of the organization, what types of traits should they be looking for to make a candidate stand out as a cybersecurity practitioner?
So Shimon, that's a really great question. And I think probably one of the most important traits that I could wish for, if you will, within a student or somebody attending one of my classes is someone who is creative, someone who thinks outside of the box. I'll explain why. A number of years ago, I went, like a lot of us, we go to different conferences, and I went to one of the Microsoft conferences, and I remember attending a session on security. Some of you may remember many years ago, it was not uncommon to have to reboot your machine every single day. It was just common practice. One of the participants stood up and asked the subject matter expert from Microsoft, and he says, hey, how come you can solve the stability issue within your operating system, but it doesn't seem like you can solve the security problem? And I thought his answer was kind of telling relative to this idea of creativity. His answer was that in one case, it's man against the machine. In the other case, it's man against man. And when you start to bring people into the equation and their own individual creativity, we have to be able to counter that creativity with creativity on our own. So it's in many ways a kind of a cat and mouse game that we're currently in, that we do one thing, somebody reacts a certain way. They do something, we react a certain way. And so there's a constant, we think that we've always achieved the Holy Grail. We've got this new particular cryptographic standard, or we've got this new particular hardware appliance that's going to solve all of our problems. Well, it turns out that human ingenuity, being what it is, simply looks at that as a challenge, as a puzzle, and figures out a way to circumvent it. So from my perspective as an educator, I think probably the most important, or one of the most important characteristics for candidates is being able to think creatively, be able to think outside the box, because they're going to be presented with a barrage of threats out there that may not follow certain predictable norms, because again, they're dealing with man against man, not man against the machine.
Understood. Yes, there's going to be a certain requirement for critical thinking and analysis, and I completely agree with that. I'm just looking forward to hearing the presentation. What is the topic of your presentation?
So what I'm talking about today in the keynote is a presentation referred to as Building the Next Generation of Cyber Defenders and How to Tap into the League of the Wounded Warriors. So we think we've actually found a population, we've built a training continuum to address some of these things we've been talking about, and identified how we take existing bodies of knowledge, put them together, and a comprehensive program that's long-term, not short-term, and then bolt on a capstone project that's performance-based at the end to actually measure real skills. And so we take them through the entire life cycle, if you will, of IT core competency skills up into cyber skills, and we'll be talking about that in more detail in the presentation.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Joan. Appreciate your time.